I realized some topics were missing, and before I actually jump into my original topic, if I could modify the slides. That's why the glitch of setting up the system, going through certain slides. I'm going to talk through my experience because I don't believe you're here to hear stats or you're here to listen to something that you're going to find it easily available. Because I think we've been doing a lot of upskilling during the pandemic. So I'm going to talk about my experiences and things that I feel are worth sharing, especially. And I think one of the questions that came up, which was really nice, of the pandemic and the lessons that can be learned from it, right? So I guess I'm going to really talk about that. So I start with always a quote and I end with a quote. That's something that I've been consistent with. So yes, hopefully even I will learn something, and I've been already learning quite a bit from the previous speakers, so really looking forward to it. And feel free to, have this as a dialogue. We are here to obviously share our experiences, learn from each other. Now, to understand anything in the future, it's always important for us to look at something in the past. And which is where I believe the acceleration always kicks in, right? So if you have to look at the current situation or the coming years, I think it's important for us to understand what has driven it. I think we've read enough about the fourth industrial revolution and all of that. But if you look at the pace, the reason I bring this up is for two factors. One is that how quickly the pace is only going up. So we are not that far away from our fifth industrial revolution. It's not going to be too long before we see that happening. At the same time, the second thing, which I think interestingly one of the speakers did cover, was that how roles today are changing. Somebody will do morning a job, somebody will do in the evening another job. I think we are here to solve problems. At least all of us have been designated to say do AP, AR. I think I remember you stating that. And what I have realized, I'm a mother of an 8-year-old kid. So I don't think anybody today asked her a question like, what will you do beta when you grow up? I think what her responses have, so far I've seen interestingly is about how she wants to solve certain things. I don't want to do a job, I want to make money, but I want to make it smartly. So her solutions are those. And I don't remember giving these answers. I used to be like, I'll be a teacher, after 2 months I'll be a doctor, engineer, blah, blah, blah. The jobs that exist today will not exist. And the beauty is the job that I did 20 years ago, because I have a 20-year span career, does not exist anymore. I've already seen it, and I'm guessing if you just pay a little more attention, and my presentation is a lot about that, is about for you to start paying attention to things that are happening already, and things that you are experiencing already. I have experiences, I'm sure you have as well. Like go back and even look at your grocery experience, and for which I think I will share certain slides, right? This is another interesting slide, and this was my pre-pandemic slide, excepting there was no 2020 versus X, right? Because I used to say, oh, guys, there's going to be this, only 5% is automatable, nothing else is automatable and all that. Interestingly, that 5% has been if people are from finance, they will understand the cumulative term. It has been 5% over a period of time. So today, out of the 100 jobs that are there, 5 things have been automated. In the coming days, another 5, another 5. And when I say jobs, they're not jobs, like not the job of Meera, Sanghvi. The task that I do. Like for example, how do I prioritize when I'm sitting here? And today as well, the brainwave started. And one of the things that I do is I tell my team, obviously all of us have that, you have to be here, but you have to tell your team what to do. I don't need to tell them. I have a bot that does that for me. So 5% of my task is getting automated. And everybody was like, Meera, that's going to save you 5 minutes. I said, that's 5 minutes, and you just add that drop in the ocean. Keep adding it. So that's all it is. It saves me 5 minutes in a day. In a year, it's 22 hours. That's half a work week. If I were to be religious and be, doing only 40 hours, of course I do more than that. So that's where the perspective changes, right? If you really look at RPA, if you look at automation, if you look at any of these, the example that I just gave, what are we looking at doing? You're an employee too. Forget your employees for a moment. You're an employee too. What is it that you don't like doing? Why do you do it? That's my question to you. Why do you do it? Don't do it. Figure out a way not to do it. That's really, really important for us. Now think about your teams then. Because if you do boring tasks, your teams are also doing boring tasks because you're used to it. That's the way we have been brought up. Not to question the status quo. Question the status quo is what today's generation is teaching us. And I think that's our lesson back. We need to take it back. How do we, like the example of how Amazon is creating this amazing experience. I keep telling people, you don't need to be in the sales world. Look at Amazon and understand how can we do our work in a similar fashion. It doesn't have to be the exact same use case. And I'll talk about that as a perspective. So to remove the mundane. Keep looking for those mundane tasks. How I used to buy groceries 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago has drastically changed, has saved my time drastically today. People say even my mom has stopped going to a store, and I love that change in her. That's what the change is. That's what we are going through. That's the revolution we are part of. Embrace it, accept it. So if you really look at it for a second, now let's go again a few steps and look at things like, is this all like current? Is this only recently in the last 5 years, 10 years? Not really. If you truly look at it, how many of you have done this by the show of hands as kids? Right? That was my most privileged task, by the way. My mom and dad would say, here's the bank book. You need to go, passbook. You need to go, terms that I'm even forgetting right now. Passbook. This is what you're going to go withdraw 100 rupees. And you're going to go across, and I used to go nicely, fill up the form and all of that. Make mistake, that lady will say, go fill it up again, because even she knows my father is trying to teach me a lesson. So she will say, go fill it up again. And I would, make that form and happen. It's a good 15, 20 minutes task. I took my 8-year-old daughter, and I took her because by the virtue of something that we were supposed to close out with a bank, we had to go, or was it a visa? I don't quite remember. The story is that we landed up in a bank after God knows how many years. After how many decades actually. We landed up in a bank, and I'm just telling her, let's fill up this form. You know what? I used to do this as a child. Let's do this together. And we do a lot of activities together. So I said, let's fill it up, Sarah, and let's do this together. And we're filling up the form together. And then I took her to the ATM. And I said, this is also the way you can withdraw cash. Put this in, put the pin, it comes out. Why did you do that? That was her first question to me. Like, why? And I realized that, oh my God, that's the question that she has for me. Not that, bonding that I had with my father and how can I have that bond with my daughter. It was like, why did you do this? And look at the whole bank, it's empty. Why are you even standing here like in a queue and trying to follow that? And I was like, no, it never used to be empty. And I'm trying to explain, it's not going through, and then I just gave up. And then it made a lot of sense. So if you truly look at it, now this is what all of us have experienced pre-pandemic. And if you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure this out, but certain signs will give away. This is an airport scenario. We all used to go there, and I think I have a husband who's a stickler for time. So we used to be there 4-5 hours early. So our trip to, I'll tell you stories because I think I'm fairly good at telling stories. So there was a time that we were supposed to go to Bali, and I'm like, year end, HP gives us off at the year end. I'm super excited, I want to go. I've told all my friends, and we didn't have a kid then, so we were like, we're going for a week, and I'm going to get my tan, and I'm going to come back. And we stood in this queue, which was like, my husband was like 4 hours early, and we are standing and all of that. The counter also hadn't opened. We almost reached we are the initial customers, so we managed not such a big queue, but a very small queue. And then she says, listen, you can't board this flight because you don't have a transit visa. I said, what the hell is a transit visa? Explain to me, I don't understand this term. And she's like, no, because yours is high cost when you're going, but low cost when you're transiting from Singapore. You don't have a Singapore visa. I said, I don't care, I don't want to get in Singapore. I don't even want to see Singapore. I want to only go to Bali. You make sure I only go to Bali. I said, it's your responsibility. You just make sure I go to Bali. And she's like, no, ma'am, it's not possible. We stood, long story short, for a good 3 more hours, and I was almost ready to cry. My husband said, let's just go back home, jack it, it's not gonna happen. And the Make My Trip lady who was helping us was attending her own wedding, so she also couldn't answer, and I was not heartless to tell, what did you book us on? So I said, forget it. And then finally, some manager came in from the airport and said, guess what? you're flying a high cost. Why don't you fly the high cost and continue to finish your journey? I was like, 3 hours? Why didn't you tell me? Like, why didn't you tell me this before? So we had to pay some 20,000-30,000 and we finished it and all that happened. But that's the beauty. Today, if I walk into an airport, the interesting part is, recently when I did, somebody just said, oh, I'm not getting my boarding pass, something is wrong. The guy immediately came, he said, sir, you could be overbooked or there could be a challenge, let me just check it. I said, how beautiful is this system where the person is just immediately a part of the exception and realizing that, listen, this person is not able to board for XYZ reason. That manager who showed up was actually helping all such cases who are a part of the Six Sigma failures, like exceptions in so many years of traveling. That was my exception only. The interesting thing here and the takeaway for me was the jobs did not go away. Roles did not go away. They existed. They all became part of managing exceptions now. But from a customer standpoint, I'm a customer. I love that experience. Yes, I like talking to the person as well, but I like the whole experience as well, that they are just straight into exception management. Think of your business in a similar way. Don't try to think of it as, I can't automate because of XYZ reason. Think of my customers, 95% customers are happy. We all have had those CSAT scores and all the other VIA scores. We are focused on only 1 or 2 with the Pareto ka logic. Let's not. Let's think of how do we cater to the entire rest of the category. How do we look at all of them? Now, that's the piece that we need to think of. They are taking care of every single exception in a much faster way. They don't take 3 hours like me, almost ready to cry, like I'm not ready to give up my trip yet. Now, if you see it, this is where my 5%, I'll go back to my 5% slide. I used to tell pre-pandemic the slides, and I think Charmaine has listened to it as well, those talks, where I used to say, imagine if I had to have a brain surgery, there'll be this precision surgery, and imagine the robots are going to like operate on me with somebody being there. I never thought the 5% is going to be somebody which is easily available in our country and is excess of labor. Nurses. I never thought in my wildest of dreams that's going to be the 5%. And again, that's transformation in my head. That was a teaching for me in the pandemic, that the 5% does not have to come in for that high precision heart surgery or brain surgery, will come in places where you need. The need earlier, pre-pandemic, may have been that it is a heart and a brain surgery and the doctor is in Hawaii, doesn't want to operate or doesn't want to come down to India because he's worried. But today's world, it's very different. That 5% is that those nurses who in Europe could take some time off, because what happens is, again, wherever there are flags, yellow flags and red flags, the nurses will come in. They have not gone away. Are the nurses' job gone away? I don't think so. I don't see any of our hospitals having any less staff. If anything, more. Right? And you might say it's pandemic or whatever. The debates, we can keep having those debates. But the challenge is that a lot of it has been automated. And that is what you need to look at. Imagine the world around us is changing. So this is where I tell you that keep your mind open. Now, if the world around you is changing, how is our companies not changing? Which is where we need to think of. Which is where we need to look at, right? Which is where we need to kind of start thinking about how else do we start considering. These are images that I kind of obviously looked them up and tried finding them. Interestingly, during COVID, the new normal, right? It's interestingly such great case studies. And I love this image particularly because this is what I call cobots. You work with the automation. You don't work away from the automation. Don't think of it as something that's there. Oh, big basket is coming, all the chote wale kirana shops are gone. No, kirana shops are still there. I still go to my kirana shop. I still buy something that is needed. In fact, there is a kirana store in my building only. That is what has happened. You have to understand the need. You have to understand the fix and Fix that gap. That is what is important for us to look at. So this is where I come back to the new normal, because the robotics that I work with are all non-visible. They're all software bots. So I can't show you an example of it, which is why I need to show you some physical bots, right? So this is where it is. Now I also touch upon a topic which is very, very close to my heart. And I think yesterday's day was largely spent on discussing the labor and what do we do for our employees, how else do we take forward. So you might ask, how do we bring about a change? How do we look at automation? How do we consider it? How do we, find ways to figure it out? What will happen then in our scenario, the industry that we are part of? The interesting part is that if you look at it, and I think somebody did cover, but this is more pictorial so that it stays. Different people are different, so somebody is visual, somebody is kinesthetic, all of that, so I try to make it visual as well. So if you really look at it, roles are only changing because we are looking at doing more insight-based work. So I think I'll also take another example. If you remember earlier, shared services used to exist in different parts of the world. Do you remember the multi-countries shared service model? Do you remember that shared service trying to be a little more systematic shared service? And then what happened? The GBS world we are living in right now, which is the global business service. So anybody does anything, right? Even in Bangalore, somebody is handling a query which is very specific. Sometimes somebody is giving directions to a place. Somebody is doing something that they've never even known existed, or is sorting out a labor-related issue, or sorting out something that the physical documents they may never have seen, right? So that's the GBS world. But that GBS world has to move into an insight business services. We need to move away from a back office or a front office model to a more central office model. And the only way that will happen is if you stop doing the transactional work, if you stop putting so much focus on governance and normalization, right? Your focus needs to be on insight. Your focus needs to be on the same thing of how an employee can do AR, AP, and say some other, maybe even answer some queries in the same day. And yet find that I'm still excited about my job, because even we want to do that only when we are excited about it. But if I have to every day come in, look at invoices, sort them out for myself, I don't think I want to do that job for too long. That's where even the attrition comes in, right? The fatigue. You're not doing this for cost savings anymore. I don't believe RPA's long-term story is cost savings at all. It is to change the way we do things, to change the way we work, and to change our employees' perspective as well. And to tell our employees we value you. What do we get beaten up in our VIAs mostly for? How bad our processes are. How bad and lengthy is our, tool system. Most of us do, even a technology company does. Let's just accept it, let's normalize the discussion. Let's focus on how do we fix our employees' problems. We fix them by helping them go through it faster, right? That is where it is. They don't want to do the manual work. They just don't know what else can they do. That's where you upskill. That's where comes in a lot more perspective. And the interesting piece is, automation never comes in silo. So you can never look at automation as saying, all right, I'm just going to take RP and I'm going to implement it. Garbage in, garbage out, fantastic example. I always insist on this. That was the first thing I learned, because when I was learning computer science, besides Charles Babbage, it was that garbage in, garbage out. And I always use that example because it's homecoming for me. You cannot design processes, you cannot have things where things are not sorted. So RPA is not only the solution. You need to figure out what all can you do. And the interesting piece is that there's a basket of solutions available. You need to bring them together. You need to get them together and sort them together. Now, also, I have heard in a lot of my discussions, these are fairly newer slides, because I've always heard people saying that we have this automation anxiety. What do I do? How do I take that away? How do I take that away from my employees? How do you roll out programs of, say, citizen-led to everybody? One of the things that I do is democratize automation in my entire company. Everybody needs to build a bot. Everybody needs to have a bot. You need to think of a bot like you think of Excel. That's like being crazy, absolutely crazy, I agree. People hate us for it, but at the same time, what are you doing? You're kind of taking away the fear of automation. You're trying to tell them that, listen, we're not taking things away from you. We are adding things for you. We're making your life easier. When we gave you Excel, it was to remove all the manual calculations, sitting with a calculator, adding one more thing. That was the idea. And today's children don't know that there is a physical calculator, because most of them don't, unless and until there's a scientific calculator need. Similarly, you need to kind of take that away, that they are not here to take your jobs, but guess what? You're not fighting with them. You need to fight the battle of entire transformation together with all the technology help we can get. Otherwise, somebody else will do it. It's very simple. It's very, very straightforward. If we don't do it, somebody else will do it. And when somebody else does it, your competitor does it, then you are pretty much at the back seat. You're literally just following up on whatever they're doing. You're not doing any more things that are innovative, creative. You're killing all those basic things that we exist for. As management, that's what we are there for. To bring out that creativity, to bring out that innovation, not to kill it. And that's the whole point, right? We need to think of it as, how do they remove that automation anxiety? We create a lot of awareness. We create the fact that, we don't say every time an RPA comes in, it's only to save XYZ. It is to improve our VIA scores. It's to improve our employee satisfaction. It's to improve our day-to-day experiences that we go through, right? Link them to actual problems that we have. Link them to real issues that we face, right? And if you even talk about it, I go back to an example, is the pyramids. Luckily, I'm visiting them soon. So if you talk about any of these, right, what skills do I need to stay relevant in this today's world? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how do I stay relevant? How do I still have my job? How do I make sure I'm secured? So you create awareness. You create awareness through the fact that these are skills is what we are always looking for. And when something that is disruptive, nobody has ever asked, was this done before? Am I being creative? Do I need to really innovate? Why do I need to do this? Why do I need to have a strategic mindset? Nobody has ever said it. Look at any of your big marvels around you. Look at any of your big milestones around you. What you'll interestingly see is that each of these fit them beautifully. And that's where I would say that you go take those kind of slides and go back and educate your team. And the fact that, a lot of these, like if you look at it, I believed I was an ops person from day in, right? And people management, ops, that was my game, and that was what I wanted to do. Obviously, transformation has become my new love, new crush, and I'm like here. I used to be one of those ops person, and a lot of my teams I see, their roles have changed. They've become this solution architect, solution evangelist, somebody's become an engagement lead for something. You look at it, all of these guys had very similar role. Say you're good with process, and this is the awareness that you create with your team. You're good with process. How do you understand that process and see where are the gaps? That's when you avoid garbage in, garbage out. If you're good with, say, being innovative and creative, how do you become a problem solver? How can you take up a persona of being a problem solver? Think of it in a different way. Be innovative, be creative. That's what it is. And it's a big culture shift, right? I mean, you can't just talk about going through all of this and not changing the culture. But if it stops down, it always works with a bottoms-up approach. And that's what we're doing, right? The whole idea of letting them experiment. An example that I think I was sharing in the morning with someone, you let children be in the playground so that they can play with the sand. You don't say, don't touch the sand, don't do this, don't do that, you'll fall. Let them fall. Automation is very similar. You let them experiment. There's more than enough automation that's available for free, by the way, for us to experiment. More than enough courses that are available online, which are free these days. Let them experiment, let them figure it out. That's the only way that the mindset change will come in. That's the only way how people are going to start thinking differently. Interestingly, even yesterday, somebody, I noticed, interchange these terminologies, right? So if you look at it, if you ask yourselves, and you see that everybody says digitization, our company is going through digitization. I don't think so. Because digitization is something that you've done like at least a decade ago. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been here, first of all. So it's very similar, digits. So you're converting analog to digits. So you're converting all that data. If you look at digitalization, you're looking at the processes. And a lot of us somewhere are here to here. So if you look at digital transformation, that is what most of us are going through. And it's important for you to understand the distinction, because you're going to use these terms, you're going to talk about it. And like I said, I've seen even leaders make mistakes with these. So be careful about it. It's really, really important. In fact, when I put this slide together, a lot of my team members said, oh, I did not know this difference. So we do digital transformation, by the way, day in, day out, and we didn't know the difference. So it's important for us to educate ourselves. It's important for us to understand. And digital transformation is, interestingly, I can share my story of how we did digital transformation. It will never match with another story exactly the same. Why? Because people, processes, and tools, if you look at it, fundamentally, that's what drives your digital transformation. And people is a very, very big aspect of it. Make no mistake. We only talk about tools. We only talk about strategy to an extent, and I've noticed strategy also isn't given enough importance, but we only talk about tools. Nobody talks about people. Nobody, your employees first, build processes, build innovation, then go and announce it to the world, whatever. Strategies are different. You need to come up with that. And it's extremely important. Now, the ending part of it, my presentation, I always say this. While we focus on tools and processes, please do not take your eyeball from what is really important. I don't know how many of you promote the things that you buy sometimes. Notice your, again, subconscious. I, for example, like my husband buys these shoes, which are completely compostable. I said, what has shoes got to do with composting? Why are you paying double the price? He said, think of the environment. Think of the brand it's standing for. Look at the packaging it's coming. Everything is recyclable. And I said, yeah, makes sense. So you buy the brand. What brand do you want to be? What brand do you want your customers to think when they're buying? When your customers ask you for more, sometimes the customers are also asking you for more from a sustainability, from a global impact perspective, from some other positive contributions that you're doing. And while they're never always highlighted, they are really, really important. And in India, we always say, nay, 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 it's always the low cost. Everything in low cost will work. No. People today's world are definitely very, very different. I, for one, will truly believe even if somebody has like only limited resources, they will still look for a brand. And that brand, when I say, is not the brand because you've heard it somewhere, it's a designer brand, it's the brand that it stands up for. What's the brand that you're going to stand up for? That's important for you to ask yourself. What are you doing for your global impact? What are you bringing about as a positive change? Very, very important. And interestingly, automation is like part of the sustainability goals as well. It was discussed by the UN. So, mind you, it is important. I mean, it is also like I said, I'm not going to go into things that is available for you easily. Like the fact that it is a 32 billion in less than 10 years from now as an industry, it's massive, it's massive. You know the stats, you know the data, but I'm just bringing in the perspective which is mine. So that's where it is. And with that, I end my presentation again, like I said, with a quote. So it's very, very important for us to make that change for ourselves than to be driven by that change. And which is why you need to keep thinking about your organization, in which phase is it, and how do you bring about that digital transformation? Yeah? All right, so I think I'm done. This one is for you. Any questions? I'm happy to take, and I'm happy to, you can look me up on LinkedIn as well, because I've had queries that have come in even after months of a presentation, because sometimes these things take a while for people to digest, and I totally understand and appreciate. So it's okay, even after a while you want to connect and, you know, say that, yeah, that made sense or that did not make sense, and I have a completely different perspective. Feel free. Feel free to question that. Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.